Hey, good morning. This is Ray over here at Namrack Farms. Hope you are having a fantastic start to your day. Thanks again for tuning in. We're going to continue the story with you of what God has done. And we left off yesterday talking about George Mueller and how hope began to spark, because with the shepherd there's always hope. We talked about leaving it at the feet of the shepherd. Today we're going to talk about remembering. But before we do, I have to share a little story with you. When I first got into sheep, in my first set of lambs, I was selling lambs to whoever would buy them. I mean, I had so many lambs out there. I put an ad on Craigslist, and whoever came to buy them, that's who got them. And typically the buyers would show up and they'd have some kind of crate or cage in their vehicle or a trailer to pick them up and haul them off in. And one day a gentleman showed up and said, "Hey, I want to buy some," and he was just in the pickup. He had no crate. He had no cage. And so we looked, and he said, "Yeah, I want those two right there." And he bought these two rams. And then I took his money, and I'm thinking, all right, how's this going to work? And he went to his vehicle, and he got some string. And I watched as he took one of my rams, and he took the back 2 feet, and he put them together, and he wrapped them up with that string. And then he took the front feet and put them together with the back feet, and he wrapped those up to where the lamb was literally like this. And you see the lamb, and then the lamb just quit. The lamb gave up. The lamb was all bound up and tied up, and he laid there. He gave up. So the man put both rams in the back of his truck, and he drove off. And I went up and I told Katie, I said, "I can't believe what I just saw." Well, see, that lamb, while he was getting tied up, he was fighting it. But when he got tied up, he gave up. And that was where I was at in that very moment. As I'm reading through George Mueller's story and there's hope starting to build in me, I felt like this. Because Ray Carmen does not do debt well. I do not like being in debt. It says in Romans 14 that any man who does something that's not in faith, to them it is sin. And when I sign my name on a dotted line and I tell someone, yes, I'll be the borrower and you can be the lender and I'll be your servant, that's exactly how I feel. Like it right there. And I was here borrowing money at that point in time, borrowing money to buy food. And then I had gotten so frustrated and so upset and just decided that God had rejected me, He had abandoned me, He had left me in the wilderness, and then if I was going to make it, it was up to me. That I went, and without consulting my father, without consulting my wife, I went and bought a new vehicle for the family. I didn't tell anybody. I just did it one day. It was a random rush decision. I pulled up and I'm going to buy that car right over there. And I just signed my name. I was $43,000, suddenly $43,000 in debt. And I felt chains wrapped around my body, and I felt just like it. And I had just given up. I said, what's the point? It's the vanity of all vanities. I'll live out my days. And then here we are, and I'm reading George Mueller's story, and something that really struck a chord with me that really made me, I felt like George was my brother. He said, don't borrow from anyone. It's not right. And I thought about that verse in Romans 14. It's like, yeah, for me, it's not. I can't do that because I feel like I'm sinning when I do that. And then he said, this is how he put it. He said, Paul said, owe no man anything but the debt of love. And he said the reason Paul said it's because Jesus said you can't serve two masters. You can't serve God and money. And then he went all the way back and he said that's because in the Proverbs we see that the borrower is servant to the lender. So if you sign your name, you are a servant to the lender. And I'm like, Lord, set me free. So my wife and I, we go through this book, and I'm telling her these stories, and I'm like, I want to pray and ask God to set us free. Now I want to set the scene. I'm bound in chains. I'm ready to give up. I'm at my last gasp. And I say, Father, I'm falling at your feet. And here I am. I'm $43,000 in debt. I have no way of paying it. I have no clients. I have nothing going on. There's no money coming in. Father, you'll have to do this. And this is what he said. It said, Ray, I want you to remember. You have all the stories in Scripture of my provisions, but I want you to remember, Ray, what have I done in your life? And he brought back to mind that Big Mac that I've told you about when I was 16, that I prayed and said, Lord, I'm so hungry. And I walk in, and there's a Big Mac offered to me. Oh, it was so good that day. And then he said, remember in 2008, February 2008, you were out of money. It was a Wednesday. And the next Wednesday, 7 days later, you owed $5,000 in bills and you had no money to pay it with. You had no clients, no way to provide for yourself. But Ray, at that time, you looked at me and said, I trust you. I trust you're going to do something. I don't know what it is, but you're going to do something. And God sent one client on Thursday, and on Friday we looked at property, and on Saturday we looked at property. On Sunday he made an offer. On Tuesday we closed. That was a miracle, by the way. It takes a cash buyer to do that. And the money paid all my bills, plus put food on my table, plus put some in the bank, plus helped give to others. God said, Ray, I've got it. Do you remember that? Okay. He said, do you remember 2012? Your son Knox was born. My wife, she decided to have a home birth, and we were at the midwife's house, and she gave birth to this son. And we came home that evening, and I cooked supper. Then I cooked breakfast the next morning. And he said, do you remember when you cooked that breakfast, it was all said and done, you had no food and no money? You had nothing. And you looked at me and you said, Father, you're going to have to provide. And I was just like, okay, yeah, I remember that. I remember because that day at 10:30, my phone rang. It was a friend saying, hey, we want to bring you lunch. And I was like, yes, we got another meal. But not only did they bring lunch, they filled the refrigerator. They filled the freezer. They filled the pantry, all through a local church food bank. They didn't know we had need. They just showed up with all this food. They felt impressed to bring food to us. God took care of us. He said, do you remember, son? Do you remember those other green pastures? Do you remember the valleys I've led you through? The green pastures I took you to? Do you trust me? And all I could say is, I have no choice. I've got no choice. I must trust you, Lord. Break my chains free. Go enjoy the shepherd and tune in tomorrow. I'll tell you the rest of the story.